The hull gave way like brittle shell under a hot knife, and the cut metal curled back in orange ribbons that froze to black the instant vacuum kissed them. Jace Corrin rode the recoil into a corridor lit by a stuttering vein of red, his boots locking to deck plating that still trembled from whatever had broken this place. Bodies drifted, slow and weightless, faces silvered by frost, hands clenched around rifles that had never fired. The scorch marks on the bulkheads weren't shaped like any muzzle flare he knew, they flowered outward in organic spirals, as if the heat had grown from inside the alloy and tried to breathe. "Aegis, I'm in," he said, voice dry inside the helmet. Telemetry confirmed, the shipmind replied, cool as winter. Target biosignature registers in Med-Sub 3. Extreme caution is advised. Advised and ignored, Jace muttered, checking the rifle's charge anyway. Full. It hadn't saved the platoons that already lay here like discarded uniforms, but routine kept the hands steady. Silence was a living thing. No alarm klaxons, no automated turrets boiling to life, just the tick of cooling steel and the slow pulse of emergency strips that painted the corridor in arterial red. Outside a viewport, the defense flotilla hung in a glittering graveyard of fractured hulls. He walked past shattered glass and a torn banner from some forgotten inspection ceremony and tried not to picture the people who had stood beneath it, proud and unworried, before the universe blinked and turned them into debris. Med-Sub 3's door had melted into a toothy grin. He stepped through with his rifle high and his breath caught. She lay chained to a surgical plank built like a jail cell pretending to be a bed. Restraints bit into wrists and ankles. Screens around her streamed biometrics in alphabets he didn't recognize. In the red wash of the emergency lights, the first impression stacked in strange harmony, skin the color of new blood, hair as white as salt blown across a winter road, a fan of torn wing membranes folded tight and trembling, and a lattice of glossy, dark scales that climbed her arms and ribs in patterns like night water on basalt. Her eyes found him and were human, brown, lucid, rimmed with exhaustion. "Please," she said, voice raw from disuse. "Make it stop. Or kill me first." The briefing had called the target a weapon system. The briefing had not prepared him for a voice that shook on the word please. Jace moved to the flank, sideways, barrel low. Up close the details multiplied, injection bruises like old constellations, surgical seams thin and angry at the base of her skull, ribs counting themselves under a hunger that had lasted too long. "Your project," he stopped himself from saying the codename out loud. "What do they call you?" "Lyra," she said after a small, stubborn pause, like the name had to cross a border to reach her mouth. "Lyra Vale. I was a xenobiologist. Before they made me this." "They did this to you?" It came out flatter than he felt. He'd seen what the thing in the docking ring had done to ships. He'd seen what the thing in the corridor had done to men. "They fitted a trigger into my spine," she whispered, the words as careful as a surgeon's hands. "They press it, and I don't get a vote. The thing inside me takes the wheel. People die. Then I wake up inside the wreckage and try to remember how to breathe." Aegis hissed in his ear. "Corrin. Termination protocol authorized. Do not approach the asset." He switched the channel dead and reached for the first restraint. The hiss as it released sounded like a relieved animal. Lyra's breath shortened. "You don't understand. If they touch that implant again, I turn into the headline you were sent to erase." "You're not a headline." The second clasp released. "And you're not in it." Her laugh was small and scraped raw. "Look at me. I am." The third lock gave way. Beneath the scales, the red of her skin warmed where fresh air kissed it. He knew, clinically, that the color was a cosmetic of altered capillaries and symbiotic pigmentation. What he felt was older and simpler, someone had tried to write monster over a person and hadn't quite erased the original handwriting. The last restraint thunked open. The station found its voice at the worst moment, alarms flowering into the quiet, sirens spooling up in panicked harmony. Lyra's body bowed like a drawn bow, wings snapping wide. Scales brightened from obsidian gloss to stormlit violet. A bead of light crawled along the implant seam, and the air got hotter by degrees. Jace could feel through armor. Back, she gasped, each syllable dragged uphill. They're pulling the trigger. The door blew inward and soldiers poured through on reflex and training, muzzles already spitting. The rest came on impulse and nightmare. Lyra turned into a vector. The motion didn't look possible under standard spin, but the numbers hadn't asked permission, they had simply happened to her. She folded and unfolded through their lines, a blur of white hair and red skin and black glass scales, and armor opened like fruit under her hands. Muzzle flashes flared and died, weapons softened to slag, a man screamed into his helmet, and then it was quiet again, except for the slow ping of cooling barrels and Lyra's breathing in ragged loops. The violet bled out of her scales. She curled in on herself on the blood-slicked deck, wings tenting, voice so small he could barely find it. "I told you," she said. "I told you to end it." He knelt, palm open on her shoulder where scales met smooth skin. She flinched but didn't pull away. "We're leaving." She looked at him like the word had edges. He shrugged off his tack mantle and wrapped it around her shoulders. It made a poor dress and a worse coat, but it was something she had chosen to pull closed with her own hands. "Can you stand?" She nodded. The truth arrived a beat later when her knees forgot their job. He caught her weight, felt the heat rolling through the scales under his gauntlet like a fever. "How long since you ate?" "Since they needed me sharp," she said, too even for his comfort. "They moved because alarms attract more men with rifles." Stairs were kinder than lifts when you didn't want cameras to take notes, so he took her into the service spine that smelled of old bleach and ionized dust. She swallowed sound and climbed, breath breaking into careful pieces, wings skimming rail and bulkhead. "I studied symbiotes," she said, tone drifting into the cadence of a lecture, maybe to convince herself she was still that person. "Not for this. Not for war. Deep vent organisms that latch to hosts and trade what both need. They wanted a weapon that could think around corners. So they pressed two lives into one skull and stapled a leash on top." "You survived," he said, and meant more than the fact of her pulse. "Survived isn't the word I'd choose." She paused at a landing, hand on the hot seam of the implant. "Sometimes it wants the room to itself." "How long until the leash fails?" "Soon." Her mouth made a tired, tilted shape that wanted to be a smile. "Soon is the only measure that has felt honest for months." On the maintenance level the lights were fewer and the shadows remembered how to stretch. She sagged into a storage niche and shut her eyes. The scales along her spine flickered, violet toward gold and back again, like a storm deciding where to land. "What helps?" he asked. "Pressure," she said, touching the thickest ridge where wings rooted into muscle. "Right there. Hard. Don't ask why, it works." He did as told, palms firm against heat-polished plates. The tremor in her shoulders smoothed. Her breathing slowed. The violent color bled back to a calmer, oil-sheen indigo. White hair slipped over his gauntlet like light torn into threads. "No one touches me gently," she said, eyes still closed. "Not since they taught me to be afraid of my own skin." "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be." He didn't move his hands. The station counted down in cold, red numbers. He counted her breaths and the way his name would sound in her mouth if she had cause to speak it. The calm lasted 4 breaths longer than he expected. Then her eyes opened, and the human brown was there again. "We have to go," she said, and the steady in her voice was a small miracle. They ran a corridor that pretended to be quiet. Cameras tracked in slow arcs overhead, he timed their blinks and pulled her along the gaps. Her feet were bare and sure, a dancer's economy in every place she put them, wings tidied tight, mantle belted in a knot she'd invented from nothing. "There's something you don't know," she said as the pressure door to Cargo C shuttered open. "Add it to the list. It's about who paid for me. Later." "Now," she said, and the word had edges again. If you're going to walk away, I need to know before hoping. He stopped because that voice could stop artillery. She stood too straight for someone who might break, red skin warmed by effort, white hair electric around a face that refused to give up its human map. I'm not leaving you, he said, and knew it was the plainest truth he'd spoken in months. Her chin lifted a fraction. Then listen. Your briefing called me an enemy asset. The lab that took me answered to your side. Black budget. Oversight in name only. When the project embarrassed the wrong admiral, they sold me to the people you were told to hate to make the paperwork tidy. The corridor felt smaller. The air tasted like old pennies. Somewhere behind the walls, the station's reactor changed its mind about staying contained. Jace held out a hand he hadn't realized he'd clenched. Lyra pressed a data wafer into his palm. Names. Transfers. Orders. It's not a story. It's proof. He slid it into a forearm slot without looking away from her. Then we live long enough to make someone read it. Jace, she said, and hearing his name soften in her mouth did something to the part of him that had been field-stripped for too long. They'll send better men next time. Then we'll be elsewhere by the time they arrive. Cargo C opened on a shuttle bay caught between flight and ruin, two service skiffs squatting under floodlights that suddenly burned white as interrogation. A voice arrived from a catwalk, amplified and too calm. Corin. Step away from the subject. Lyra's fingers found his for a heartbeat, warm, precise, choosing, and squeezed once. He stepped in front of her because some habits are older than orders. He didn't raise the rifle. He didn't let go of her hand either. The blast shutters slammed down behind them, sealing off the corridor in a single deafening heartbeat. Jace didn't look back. He half-carried Lyra toward the lift shaft, the station's warning sirens howling like a dying thing. She stumbled once, catching herself against the rail. Her claws, God, they were real, curved and dark and deadly, bit into the steel, leaving 4 neat scratches that glowed briefly before cooling. You all right? He asked. She managed a nod, hair, white as frost under crimson emergency lights, clinging to her temples. The trigger's quiet again, she said, voice raw. For now. For now's good enough. They descended into the auxiliary tram tunnel, a spine of black metal that still held traces of gravity. Pipes hissed overhead, bleeding steam that shimmered in the flickering light. Jace's shoulder lamp cut a narrow path through the dark. The air smelled like copper and ozone and something faintly organic, blood or fuel, maybe both. Lyra pressed a hand to the wall. They built this place wrong, she murmured. You can feel it, like the architecture's fighting itself. Station's been eating itself since we got here. He scanned the shadows ahead. Stay close. I'm not exactly spoiling for a walk. A shudder ran through the deck, and distant explosions thumped through the structure. Jace's visor flared with telemetry, sections collapsing, power rerouted, bulkheads locking in domino sequence. The kill team was sealing exits, pushing them toward one direction, containment or annihilation. He tapped his comm, Aegis, we need extraction on my mark. No answer. Static. Then a burst of feedback so loud it stabbed behind his eyes. Lyra winced. They're jamming you. Or, she hesitated, the corners of her mouth trembling. Or your ship isn't there anymore. He didn't let the thought form. Then we make it to the shuttles. They moved again, footsteps echoing in sync, until the tunnel widened into a loading bay. Cargo crates floated, untethered in low gravity. Emergency lights pulsed across the surfaces like slow, red waves. Jace slung his rifle and pushed off into the drift, boots kissing metal again when his magnets caught on the far side. He reached back to steady Lyra, her hand was hot, pulse thrumming under strange skin, and for a second, he forgot the war outside the airlock. Then a voice cracked over the intercom. Section C lockdown complete. Execute sweep Delta. Lyra's pupils contracted to slits. They're here. The side hatch burst inward, soldiers fanning through with surgical precision. Muzzle flashes strobed the room, white-hot bursts, tracer lines crossing in lethal geometry. Jace fired back, tight bursts, dropping 1, 2. The third didn't fall fast enough. Lyra moved before he could warn her. She leapt, glided, across the low-gravity bay, wings unfurling in a blur of crimson and white. Her body arced like a comet's tail, graceful and terrible. Claws sliced through armor, and plasma bursts scattered off her scales. The scent of scorched ozone filled the air. Jace ducked behind a crate, heart hammering. He'd seen death before, but never like this. It was as if she moved through a different set of physical laws. Soldiers screamed, cut short, and silence flooded back in just as quickly. Lyra landed hard, knees folding. The purple glow along her spine flickered and dimmed. She looked at him, eyes wide and terrified of herself. Don't come closer. He came anyway. It's over. No, she pressed trembling hands to her skull. It's starting. They know you helped me. They'll use me to kill you next. Then we stay ahead of them. You can't keep outrunning governments, Jace. Watch me. He knelt and caught her chin gently between his fingers. Look at me, he said. You're still Lyra. You're not what they made you. She exhaled like the word itself was fragile glass. You talk like you believe that. I do. Her lips parted, to argue, maybe, but another explosion tore through the deck above. Panels rained sparks. The structural alarms screamed. Jace pulled her up and they sprinted toward the far hatch. The emergency corridor beyond was narrow and lit by stuttering white strips that made everything seem like flickering film. The noise of the station's dying machinery echoed through the bulkheads. They reached a ladder shaft, and Jace looked up into the blackness. Maintenance crawlspace, he said. It'll lead us above the launch bay. Lyra's wings folded close against her back. You first, she said. You're better bait. He almost smiled. Stay close. And if I fall, catch me. That's not how wings work. We'll test that. The climb was agony, hot metal under his palms, gravity oscillating as systems failed. Twice he slipped, and twice Lyra's clawed hands caught him by the vest. Her grip was stronger than any human's, but careful, always careful. When they reached the top, she collapsed against the bulkhead, breathing in shallow gasps. Sweat glistened on red skin, tracing paths between scales. Jace reached into his pack, pulled out a hydration capsule, and held it to her lips. She hesitated, then drank. You really don't take orders well, she said hoarsely. Never been a strong suit. A faint smile ghosted across her mouth, the first he'd seen that wasn't painted in pain. You could have killed me back there. Thought about it, he said, deadpan. Then, softer, didn't like the math. Math? Killing one person who's been enslaved versus letting the people who built her walk free. He shrugged. Numbers didn't balance. Lyra looked away, eyes glinting like burnished bronze in the emergency light. You don't even know me. Then let's live long enough to fix that. Below them, the station groaned like an old ship breaking its spine. Sirens blended with the hollow thunder of detonations, controlled, deliberate. They were scuttling the entire facility. They'd rather erase it than let us escape, she said quietly. Then we don't give them the satisfaction. He keyed the hatch and dropped into the launch gantry. The hangar stretched below, vast and white under sterile floodlights. 2 shuttles sat in their cradles. Beside them, a dozen soldiers moved with mechanical rhythm, loading crates into the nearest craft. Lyra touched his shoulder. The one on the right, smaller drive, easier to launch. You sure? I remember the layout. I built the system before they locked me inside it. Her voice broke halfway through. Jace glanced back. The pain in her eyes wasn't human, it was deeper, older, the kind that comes from remembering every command you've ever been forced to obey. Then we make them regret it, he said. They moved like shadows across the catwalk, keeping low. One soldier turned, puzzled by some sound, and Jace's rifle coughed once. The man dropped silently. Another two fell before alarms returned to life. The hangar drowned in red light. Go! Jace shouted. Lyra sprinted for the shuttle ramp, wings flaring for balance. Rounds snapped through the air, ricocheting off her scales. Jace fired covering bursts, each recoil jarring up his arm. She reached the hatch, slapped the control, and turned, hand outstretched. Come on! He leapt from the catwalk, landing hard beside her. The hatch slid shut just as plasma bolts seared across the hull. Inside, the air smelled of fuel and ozone. He threw himself into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over controls. Can you fly this thing? Lyra demanded, strapping herself in with shaky hands. I can make it move. Flying's optional. The engines coughed, sputtered, and caught, their low rumble vibrating through the deck. Outside, the hangar doors began to close. Punch it, she said. Hold on. The shuttle blasted forward, scraping metal as the bay doors narrowed. For a heartbeat, Jace thought they'd clipped the edge, but they burst free into open space just as the station behind them erupted in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. Through the viewport, the orbital ring broke apart, light spilling into vacuum in slow motion. Jace's hands trembled on the controls. Lyra stared in silence, her face lit by the dying glow. They'll call us terrorists, he said quietly. They always do, when someone escapes their leash. She looked at him then, the faintest curve of a smile touching her lips. So what now? He exhaled. Now we find out who we really pissed off. Jace, her voice caught on his name, the sound almost tender. Thank you. He looked at her, at the red skin that caught the starlight like wine, at the shock white hair drifting weightless around her face. Don't thank me yet, he said. We're still breathing. That's just step one. Her gaze lingered on him, unreadable. Then let's make step two count. Outside, the stars unfolded, cold, endless, and full of questions. Space swallowed the shuttle like a closing fist. The engines leveled out, hum softening to a steady vibration. Stars scattered ahead, cold, white, and mercilessly distant. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, chin lifted toward the viewport, eyes unfocused. Her hair floated around her face in the low-G cabin, strands of white fire against the red of her skin. Jace kept his hands on the controls long after the NAV computer took over. His pulse hadn't learned the difference between combat and silence yet. They'll track us, Lyra said at last. My implant transmits whenever it's awake. He shot her a look. Still awake. For now. She brushed the back of her neck, flinching when her fingers found the sealed ridge of metal fused to flesh. It's like a sleeper code. They only need the right frequency to wake the beast again. He pushed the throttle a notch forward. Then we stay off every frequency they own. Her laugh was thin. They own them all. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached under the console and ripped out the beacon module with a grunt, tossing it into the storage bin. Sparks fluttered and died. The comm board went dark except for internal channels. There, he said. Now we're ghosts. Lyra turned to him, and for the first time since the station, her gaze softened. Why are you doing this? Because I saw you chained to a table, he said simply. Because I saw what they made you do. And because I can't pretend that's okay. She studied him for a long moment. When they made me kill those fleets, they told me I was saving lives. Do you know what it feels like to believe that, right until the screaming starts? Jace didn't, but he nodded anyway. Yeah. I've told myself the same story before pulling a trigger. Silence settled, broken only by the hum of the drives. Through the viewport, the shattered ring of the station dwindled to glittering debris. Lyra unlatched her harness. I need to see something. Where? Maintenance bay. There's an interface port, I can try to block the implant signal. He followed her aft, watching the way she moved in the low gravity, graceful even when tired. The scars along her spine glimmered faintly, bioluminescent threads tracing the path of whatever alien code lived inside her. At the console, she sank to her knees and began pulling panels open with clawed fingers. Jace crouched beside her. You built all this once, didn't you? Something like it, she said. Different ship. Different life. She connected a cable from her wrist to the access port. The monitor filled with glyphs and pulsing blue code. He watched her face tighten as streams of data scrolled past. They're trying to reacquire me, she whispered. Multiple pings from Earth defense networks. You're saying this wasn't the enemy's project? Her shoulders tensed. No. It was ours. The enemy just paid for the scrap once the politicians decided it was too ugly to exist. Jace felt his stomach drop. You're telling me we sold you? They called it a transfer of biological assets. Her tone turned sharp. They deleted my name from the records and replaced it with a serial number. You were sent to kill a mistake your commanders already signed off on. He stared at the flickering screen, memories snapping into place, the sealed mission orders, the lack of intel, the sudden insistence on no survivors. It all lined up too neatly. I thought we were the good ones, he muttered. Lyra glanced at him, eyes glimmering gold in the dim light. That's what every side says before they start burning evidence. The shuttle rocked as proximity alarms flared. Jace rushed to the cockpit. A cluster of transponders blinked on the radar, multiple intercepts closing fast. They found us. Already? 3 signatures, military pattern. They'll jam comms and fire the moment we hit range. Lyra stumbled into the cabin. Can we outrun them? Not with this engine. Then we need leverage. She leaned over the console, scanning the sensors. There, outer rim beacon. Neutral zone. Coordinates. 22 minutes burn, straight through their perimeter. That's suicide. It's sanctuary, she countered. The Concordants patrol the edge. If we cross into their space, Earth's ships won't follow without risking a treaty violation. Jace hesitated for half a second, then punched the drive to maximum thrust. The engines roared, pressing them into their seats. Missiles streaked in the dark behind them, white tails chasing. He jinked hard to port, gravity slamming sideways. The hull screamed. Lyra clutched the harness. Incoming. I see them. He toggled countermeasures, flares arced away, spinning decoys like falling stars. One missile bit the bait, the rest kept coming. The first impact ripped through the aft stabilizer. Red lights flared. Hold together, damn you, he muttered, fighting the controls. The shuttle lurched, rolling end over end. Lyra unbuckled, wings snapping wide for balance. Get us closer to that field. What are you doing? Buying you time. Before he could stop her, she slammed her clawed hand into the bulkhead interface. The implant at her neck flared gold. Her scream filled the cabin, half pain, half fury, and the lights dimmed as energy pulsed outward through the ship. The nearest missile disintegrated mid-flight. The others veered wide, sensors fried by the surge. Jace stared. You just fried half the NAV system. But we're alive, she gasped, collapsing back into the seat, smoke curling from the edges of the implant. You can thank me later. He reached over, disabling the alarms. You keep doing that, and you'll kill yourself. Already dead, she said faintly. Just waiting for the paperwork. He turned the shuttle toward the neutral beacon. The starfield shifted, and beyond it, a strange light shimmered, an enormous vessel unlike anything human-made, geometric patterns sliding across its hull. Lyra's breath caught. That's not Concordance military. That's something older. The comms crackled, alien tones filtering through before a voice translated itself into broken English. Unidentified human craft. Power down drives. You are entering Concordance jurisdiction. Jace exchanged a glance with Lyra. Well, he said, forcing a grin. At least they're talking. Don't trust that tone, she murmured. They know exactly who we are. How? Her gaze went distant, haunted. Because the thing they put inside me, it wasn't found on Earth. He stared at her, realization dawning like cold dawn. Then what the hell is it? Before she could answer, the shuttle lurched again, tractor beam lock. The stars spun as they were drawn toward the vast alien vessel, its hull glowing with impossible color. Lyra gripped his hand, claws careful on his skin. Whatever happens, she whispered, don't let them send me back. They'll have to kill me first, Jace said. The shuttle disappeared into the light. The alien ship swallowed the shuttle in light that wasn't just brightness, it was geometry come alive, gold and indigo shapes sliding across one another like a language built from motion. Jace's visor dimmed automatically, but he still felt the light against his skin, like static and warmth at once. The hull shuddered, gravity shifted, and suddenly everything was still. The airlock cycled open with a sigh. The smell that drifted in wasn't metal or oil, it was clean, impossibly so, like ozone after rain. Jace stood, rifle drawn. Lyra followed, her wings half-folded, white hair ghosting around her crimson face. She looked like she belonged more to the light than to him. Figures waited beyond the hatch, tall, insectoid beings with bronze carapaces that glimmered like moving mirrors. 4 arms apiece, jointed wrong for comfort. Their eyes caught the light and fractured it. Dr. Lyra Vale, one of them said, voice clicking and smooth at once, filtered through a translator halo. And Captain Jace Corrin. You are not prisoners. You are witnesses. Lyra's body tensed. Witnesses to what? To crimes committed in your species' name, the alien said. The council awaits your testimony. They were escorted through corridors that bent like rivers, the walls breathing faintly with each footstep. Gravity adjusted under them, softer, like walking through dream terrain. Lyra's wings brushed the edges of the passage, leaving streaks of light where her scales touched. When the doors to the chamber opened, it felt like entering the heart of a living world. Seats rose in spirals around a central dais, filled with beings of different anatomies, reptilian, crystalline, gelatinous. At the center, a circular platform rose, illuminated by soft blue light. Lyra hesitated at the edge. They'll make me relive it, she whispered. Jace's hand brushed hers. Then they'll see what we saw. She drew in a breath and stepped forward. Her scales rippled once, a faint shimmer of violet anxiety fading to calm blue. The presiding alien, the same who had greeted them, spoke again. Dr. Vale. Your survival of hybridization is unprecedented. Explain the procedure and its purpose. Lyra's voice started quiet but gained strength as she continued. They called it Project Ascendant. I was studying xenobiotic symbiosis, organisms that bond at the neural level. The military wanted soldiers who could heal, adapt, and endure impossible environments. They took my research and rewrote it in blood. They made me the prototype. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. I didn't volunteer, she said, and her tone broke something brittle inside the silence. They told me I'd save lives. But what they wanted was a weapon that could choose its targets. They grafted the symbiont into my spinal cord, then fused a control implant at the base of my skull. Every time they pressed that button, I woke up surrounded by corpses I couldn't name. Her voice wavered. Do you know what it feels like to be conscious while your hands tear someone apart? The alien delegates shifted, unreadable expressions flickering across alien faces. Enough, Jace said suddenly, stepping forward. You've heard enough to know she's not the monster in this story. The presiding alien inclined its head toward him. Captain Corrin, you disobeyed direct orders. Why? Because the orders were wrong. His voice echoed, steady. They told me she was an enemy weapon. I saw a woman chained to a table. That's the only intelligence I needed. The alien's mandibles flexed, maybe a smile. Curious species, humans. Capable of both cruelty and compassion beyond reason. Another counselor leaned forward. Dr. Vale, demonstrate control over the organism. Lyra hesitated. Her eyes met Jace's. He nodded. Slowly, she spread her wings, scales along her arms darkening from blue to deep violet. Energy rippled down her spine, illuminating the implant's faint outline beneath the skin, but her gaze stayed steady, human, alive. When the light faded, she stood taller, breath even. I'm still here, she said quietly. The presiding alien gestured with one long limb. Extraordinary. The organism adapts fully yet preserves identity. You have achieved balance. Balance, Lyra repeated bitterly. That's a polite word for surviving torture. The alien inclined its head. Perhaps. But balance has value. You have proven coexistence where only domination existed before. A vote flickered across holographic displays around the chamber. Glyphs spun like falling stars. Then the presiding alien spoke again. The council recognizes Dr. Lyra Vale as a sentient being and refugee. She is granted asylum under Concordance protection. All human charges are void. Captain Corrin, your government will mark you traitor, but you are free under our jurisdiction. Lyra swayed, her knees buckling. Jace caught her before she hit the floor. She clung to him, trembling, whispering something that might have been thank you. When she lifted her face again, tears had traced faint silver streaks across the red of her skin. The presiding alien approached. Our physicians can remove the control implant, but we cannot guarantee survival. Do you consent? Lyra's breath hitched, but she nodded. If it kills me, at least it's my choice. Jace's hand tightened around hers. I'll be here when you wake up. The procedure lasted hours. Jace watched through a transparent barrier as alien surgeons worked with instruments that phased through matter, light weaving across Lyra's body like silk. The implant came out in fragments, each piece dissolving as it left her flesh. When the last shard was gone, her body relaxed. Her wings unfolded and glowed faintly, alive, unshackled. When she woke, Jace was there. Her hand found his, fingers curling around his palm, warm and trembling. It's gone, she whispered. For the first time in years, it's just me in here. He smiled, the kind that comes from too many battles survived. Welcome back. They were assigned quarters on the Concordance ship, a suite of curved glass and soft light overlooking a field of stars. For once, they didn't run. Lyra stood by the viewport, her reflection framed in alien constellations. 3 years of cages, she said softly. Now I get to decide who I am. You already have, Jace said, stepping behind her. You're the woman who survived hell and still found a way to care. She turned, eyes luminous. Care enough to fall in love with you? He didn't answer, he didn't need to. His hands found her waist, her wings unfurling to wrap around them both. The light from the stars painted her scales in silver and violet. Later, when they lay tangled together beneath those wings, Lyra whispered, "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" Jace looked out at the stars beyond the glass. We tell the truth. We make sure no one else ends up on that table. She smiled, a small, fierce thing. Then I guess we just started a revolution. The video fades from the soft glow of alien light to the deep blue of space, the Concordance ship drifting between stars like a promise yet unbroken. Jace's voice carries through the quiet. They sent me to kill a monster. Instead, I met a woman who refused to stop being human. Her name was Lyra Vale. She taught me that survival isn't about winning, it's about remembering who you are when the world tells you to forget. The camera pans over Lyra standing at the viewport, her white hair illuminated by the starlight, her crimson skin glowing faintly under the alien sky. They called her a weapon. I call her the bridge between what we are and what we could become. Her voice joins his, calm and sure. For every cage, there's a key waiting to be made. For every monster they create, there's someone willing to see the person inside. That's the truth we'll keep telling. The ship accelerates, light streaking across the screen as it jumps into hyperspace. If you've followed us this far, Jace says with a hint of warmth, don't stop now. There are more stories in the stars, more truths they tried to hide. Lyra's smile flashes once more. Like, share, and subscribe. And remember, freedom starts when someone finally says no. The screen fades to black. The hum of engines lingers. Then, a final whisper, hers, like a heartbeat through static. I'm free.